Immediately fighting for central squares opens up attacking possibilities and pawn chains. This Sicilian defense immediately sparks a dynamic struggle, aiming to unbalance the position and challenge White's central pawns from the flank. Initiating rapid development, this knight prepares for central control and future pawn advances, keeping options open against the Sicilian's dynamism. Opening up a diagonal for the queen and preparing for a solid pawn structure, this signals a commitment to the Sicilian defense's strategic complexities. Challenging the center immediately, this pawn thrust ignites a strategic battleground, forcing Black to confront the central pawn chain and potentially opening lines for rapid development. Immediately opening the c-file offers dynamic play, but surrenders central presence. Opening the central files now invites a dynamic game where piece activity will dictate the initiative. Developing the knight immediately pressures the center pawn, a sensible and active response to White's central pawn push. Launching a knight towards c3 solidifies central presence and prepares rapid development, aiming to dominate the d5 square. Preparing to launch a queenside pawn storm, this move subtly challenges White's central control by creating future pawn breaks. Leveraging the bishop for immediate pressure, this development pins the knight and subtly prepares a kingside attack. This thoughtful pawn advance prepares to contest central squares and aims to develop the bishop, opening lines for the queenside. It subtly reinforces the knight's control and signals a desire to equalize piece activity after the opening skirmish. Emboldened by central control, White aims to seize immediate kingside initiative, potentially opening lines for attack while risking pawn structure weakness. Unleashing the queen towards the queenside immediately challenges White's central pawn structure and eyes the c3 knight, forcing a decision about the pawn chain's integrity and creating dynamic counterplay before White can solidify their imposing pawn center. Securing the queen's connection to the kingside, this move prepares to castle queenside, aiming to launch a swift pawn storm against Black's potentially exposed monarch while simultaneously reinforcing the central pawn chain. Snagging that pawn creates immediate tension, but exposes your queen to a potential discovery and leaves your queenside structure somewhat vulnerable. Instantly seizing control of the open b-file, White's rook forces Black's queen into a precarious position, potentially disrupting the coordination of Black's pieces and initiating early complications. Unleashing a bold foray, this piece aggressively targets White's queenside infrastructure, aiming to exploit any lingering weaknesses stemming from the early queen excursion, while simultaneously disrupting White's intended development by forcing a defensive reaction. Injecting immediate tension, this pawn thrust forcibly seizes central space and aims to disrupt Black's queenside harmony. The advanced e5 pawn now acts as a dagger, potentially pinning or forcing concessions, while simultaneously creating a barrier to free knight development for your opponent and opening lines for your own pieces towards the kingside if Black is not careful with their counterplay. Unleashing a storm of pawns, Black aggressively challenges White's central pawn chain, opening vital diagonals for potential counterplay. This bold capture immediately alters the pawn structure, creating new targets and forcing White to make critical decisions regarding piece development and king safety. The immediate exchange injects tactical urgency into the position, promising a dynamic and sharp continuation. The pawn's advance forcefully claims central territory, creating immediate pressure on Black's undeveloped queenside pieces and potentially opening lines for White's rook. This ambitious thrust, while creating tactical complications, also weakens White's own king safety slightly by exposing the e-file. Black must now carefully navigate the ensuing tactical skirmishes, prioritizing piece development and defense against the encroaching e-pawn. Unleashing the knight towards the center, this maneuver begins the process of rerouting the piece to a more active square, likely eyeing the d7 outpost or a subsequent jump to e5 if the opportunity arises, all while maintaining a watchful gaze on the open d-file and the potential threats to White's king. White aims to seize central control and initiate an attack on the queenside by bringing the bishop into the fray, simultaneously threatening Black's queen and opening up the a1h8 diagonal for potential future pressure. Developing the bishop to e7 solidifies black's kingside, offering a retreat square should the central tension escalate and simultaneously preparing for castling, a crucial step in securing the monarch's safety within the nascent pawn structure. Unleashing a brilliant tactical strike, white sacrifices the bishop to rip open the diagonal and target the enemy king's safety, creating a complex web of threats that will test black's defensive resources to the absolute limit. The king's safety is paramount. Castling provides immediate refuge by tucking the monarch behind a wall of pawns, transforming a potentially vulnerable piece into a more secure one and activating a rook. Unleashing the king's safety with castling opens up avenues of attack, a crucial defensive maneuver that consolidates white's position and prepares for potential central advances or even a rook lift. Black offers up the bishop pair, a clear positional concession, in a bid to alleviate white's menacing pawn mass advancing on the kingside and gain some much-needed breathing room, hoping the resulting material parity will offset the long-term structural vulnerabilities. The queen's raid on the queen's side, despite recovering material, has left black's king exposed to a relentless battery forming along the g-file. A bold maneuver, this *h6 is an attempt to disrupt white's bishop pair and create breathing room, though it does expose the kingside to potential future pressure. The pawn structure is becoming rather sharp, and black must be wary of white's initiative on the queen side. The knight on *d7 now has a clearer path to potentially reroute, but the immediate threat of white's rook on b1 still looms. This move signals black's intent to fight for central control and prevent any easy consolidation for white. Reclaiming the initiative, the white queen embarks on a perilous yet promising journey, aiming to exploit the exposed black king and disrupt the enemy's defensive structure with bold incursions. A daring sacrifice, accepting material but opening up the king's defense to white's unleashed attacking potential. Unleashing the rook on the 7th ranks opens a devastating battery aimed squarely at black's king, threatening immediate material gain and a cascade of forced lines. Accepting this sacrifice opens up the f-file, a dangerous highway straight to your king, demanding immediate and precise defensive maneuvers to survive the oncoming storm. Unleashing a devastating discovered attack, white forces the black king into the open and initiates a mating sequence that will likely prove irresistible. Harnessing the discovered attack on the queen, black injects immediate tactical urgency, sacrificing material to re-establish central control and escape the devastating discovered check. Unleashing a decisive sacrifice, white punctures the protective pawn shield around black's monarch and opens a devastating diagonal for the bishop, forcing a critical decision that will dictate the fate of the exposed king. The exposed black king, now bereft of its pawn shield, becomes a primary target, inviting further relentless pursuit. Unleashing a devastating discovered attack, white leverages the open f-file to force the black king into a perilous mating net, fundamentally altering the material balance and the very structure of the game. The king's desperate dash across the board, while momentarily evading immediate capture, exposes it to a horrifying network of threats from white's active pieces, turning its flight into a perilous odyssey. Unleashing the rook down the open file rips open the king's defense, sacrificing material to expose the black monarch to a devastating onslaught. The bishop embarks on a crucial mission to connect its brethren and solidify the king's precarious safety, initiating a defensive screen against the rampant white monarch. Reasserting pressure on the queen's side, this knight redeploys with surprising speed, eyeing the now exposed b3 square and preparing to join the central fray, potentially unlocking lines that were previously jammed. A desperate check aiming to disrupt white's initiated mating attack, forcing a response that temporarily halts the crushing pressure on black's king, but it sacrifices tempo and concedes the initiative completely, paving the way for white's imposing rook on the f-file to swing over and finish the job. Securing the king's escape route becomes paramount now, anticipating any immediate threats and preparing for a potential defensive retreat if the central pressure intensifies. Black's queen, a relentless infiltrator, now seeks to exploit the exposed white king by forcing a perpetual check, a desperate but logical attempt to salvage a draw from a decidedly lost position. Unleashing the knight back to its starting square, this maneuver prioritizes rebuilding white's defensive structure and preparing for a potential king's side advance, aiming to alleviate the immediate pressure while eyeing the vulnerable black monarch. Unleashing the queen deep into enemy territory, this captures a pawn, but opens the floodgates for white's attacking pieces to converge, transforming the board into a tactical minefield where precise calculation becomes paramount. The rook's advance to g8 seizes the now open file, threatening immediate mate on g7 and creating immense pressure against the exposed black king. Black's queen retreat to f2, despite its immediate safety, signals a desperate scramble to stabilize a position already teetering precariously. The pawn structure around the king is severely compromised, offering white's pieces multiple avenues of attack, while black's own pieces are awkwardly placed, unable to generate any meaningful counterplay. This maneuver, while seemingly a natural retreat, fails to address the fundamental weaknesses that have accumulated, and instead focuses on a fleeting moment of safety at the cost of further positional concessions. A daring exchange sacrifice. By clearing the f-file and forcing the black queen into an exposed position, white hopes to exploit the uncovered king and reignite the attack. Black is desperately trying to keep material equal, but by taking another pawn, they are further neglecting the critical defensive needs around their exposed king. The rook on f3 actively supports the advance towards the black king, creating immediate attacking potential along the third rank and preparing for a potential infiltration. The black monarch, now exposed on the 7th rank after a series of aggressive exchanges, seeks refuge, desperately attempting to escape the powerful white rook that has infiltrated its defensive perimeter.